Okay, guess what? It's now time to learn the final bones, and this is going to be the last bone test of this particular unit. Then we'll move on to muscles. It's time for my prep period. So today we'll be going over the bones of the pelvis, leg, and foot. Again, all these different lessons are not all-inclusive. These are just some of the major terms that will help you, I guess, have a basic understanding of anatomy in these particular regions. So let's learn them. Don't forget, for credit on these days when we do learn the bones, you want to make a study guide, write down all 30 terms, write down a definition of, I guess, a description of where these are located or what they look like, and you'll submit those for points today. So here we go. Study. First term. So these are not in order, let's say, of of importance or anything specific. These were actually from a practice test that I've put the answers on. So first, this entire structure is called the pelvis, but the pelvis is made up of like several parts. So we have these two crest-like structures. These are called the iliums. Now this is the sacrum. But anyway, this whole entire structure is the pelvic girdle or the pelvis. So made up of two iliac crests or two iliums. So that's what it is. Ilium is one half of the pelvis. Now, between the sacrum and the ilium, there is what's called a sacroiliac joint. So this joint is a somewhat flexible cartilaginous joint, and it can get misaligned. And if you have a misplacement or it gets out of place, you can get sacroiliac pain or sciatica, which is when you get like shooting nerve pain down your leg. I know this. I have this issue. So you can actually get this aligned with a chiropractor or various stretches, etc. So the fused base of the spine is called your sacrum, which is actually part of your pelvic girdle. So that's called the sacrum. For the top edge of the pelvis is called your iliac crest. So this is the ilium. So the top edge is the iliac crest. If you actually put your hands on your hips or on your hip bones, the top edge is the iliac crest. Okay, now at the base of your pelvis, there is a front and a back region of the actual pelvic bone. The yellow part here is called your ischium. So if you're sitting down, you're sitting on your ischium. So like I always think about like when you're a child, I had like wheat thins in my throat. Today's lesson is sponsored by Wheat Thins. Send me money. Anyway, so the ischium is the part in which you're sitting on. So if somebody was like sitting on your lap and starts like moving their like, I don't know, butt back and forth, and they're skinny, they might be grinding their like butt bone, or really it'd be their ischium into your leg. So that's what it is. Ischium. Now, the front portion of your pelvis is called your pubis, which makes sense because it's in the pubic region. So the front kind of part of the pelvis is the pubis. Now, we haven't got to the term that kind of explains what this is, but this angle at the base of the pelvis is called the pubic angle. Sometimes I call it the pelvic angle, sometimes I call it the pubic angle, but regardless, it's the same thing. So if that measurement, if we take like some kind of a calculation device, and we measure the angle here. If it is less than 90 degrees, we're dealing with a male pelvis. Now, this is only relevant if this is a pubescent pelvis. So prepubescent kids would have pelvises that are all kind of very similar and hard to identify by gender or by sex. Once they went through adolescence or puberty, there would be a hormonal change in the structure of the pelvis, causing it to become wider and the pelvic angle to increase in females. In males, it stays about the same. So if it's less than 90 degrees, it's going to be a male. If it's more than 90 degrees, it'll be a female. All right, these are the hip sockets. So this is where the head of the femur actually goes into. So you might think it's called a fossa. I mean, it is a fossa, but it has its own name called the acetabulum. So sometimes I remember this one by if your hip gets out of place, or if you have a poor hip alignment, it might cause pain down your buttocks or your legs. So I always say that if you have a problem with this, it'd be a pain in the acetabulum. That's how I remember it. It's number 8. Number 9. At the base of the pelvis, where the two halves come together, there is a cartilaginous joint. It is called your pubic symphysis. So it's held together by this joint. Now, in very, very rare cases, I used to say this never happens, but I do have a friend this happened to, so I can't say that anymore. Let's say that a female was in birth or childbirth. Let's say the baby is too large. It cannot fit through the pelvic inlet or outlet, which is like the opening in the pelvis. What could happen if there's enough stress or force, you could actually break the pelvis at this joint and separate it, which requires surgery to put it back together. I used to joke that this never actually happens in modern day science. It can happen. I know a friend who is also a school teacher, and she did break her pelvis, ended up with surgery and in a wheelchair after giving birth to her first child. Good to know, right? Number 10. The large holes in between the pubis and the ischium at the bottom, they're called the obturator foramen. Don't forget, a foramen is a hole in a bone, which makes sense. So anytime there's a hole in a bone, it's foramen, obturator. The way to remember this is, well, back in the day, back when we had landline phones and operators, if you wanted to get a hold of the operator, you would press the 0. So these are holes or zero-shaped objects. So I think of operator, obturator foramen. Okay, I went over this. Helps determine the sex of the pelvis. That would be the pubic angle. So if you measure the pubic angle, if it's greater than 90, it's a female. If it's less than 90, it is a male. So if it's greater than 90 degrees, again, the next one for 12, it's female. So you would be able to tell if I showed you a different diagram kind of showing how the pubic inlet and outlet and angle are different between a male and female. I don't have it in the slideshow. 13. Now, the large opening in the pelvis is the pelvic inlet. If we're looking from the front of the pelvis, if we're looking from the back of the pelvis, it is called the pubic outlet. Point is, a baby must pass through the pelvic inlet and out the pelvic outlet. If the pelvis was too small and the baby was too large, the baby would get stuck. That could cause stress on the mother, the baby, and both of which could die in childbirth without modern medical procedures like C-sections. Nowadays, we'd know if the baby was too large, and we would probably just advise a C-section. So, from the behind or from the back, if you're looking at the pelvis, you have a pelvic outlet. It's the area where the baby would come out. 15. Between the spine and the legs, this entire structure is called the pelvic bone or the pelvic girdle. So we just say it's the pelvis. 15, the shin bone, the larger of the two shin bones. This is called your tibia. So your tibia doesn't have a lot of muscle in front of it, so that's why it hurts if you hit your shin, because there's really nothing protecting the front edge of your tibia. Your kneecaps are number 17. Those are just called your patellas. Don't know what else to tell you about that. Sometimes I'll joke because it sounds like umbrella. So I'd say like patella, ella, a, song Mariana. All right, 18. Largest bone in the body, upper leg bone, would be the femur. So femur is a large upper leg bone. Now, next to the tibia, there's a smaller, more slender bone out to the lateral side. And it's called your fibula, not a fibia, fibula. Ankle bone is called your malleolus. Now, technically you have two ankle bones. You have one on the inside and outside of your ankle. This one would technically be the lateral malleolus, and the one on the inside edge would be the medial malleolus. But since I want to keep this to 30 terms, we're just going to say, just know in general that the, bony bump at the base of the tibia and fibula, those are called malleolus. 21, we're getting into the bones of the foot. So right here, this arch-shaped bone that kind of interacts with these three toe bones, that is called the navicular. I was thinking of if you're driving a car and the arch, the steering wheel, it's like you're navigating. So I think of it as the navigation bone, navicular. Now, these three bones right here are three similar kind of shaped bones associated with the big toe, index toe, middle toe. They're called cuneiforms. So they are similar in shape to a certain degree. So I think if cuneiforms is similar in form. Probably if I Googled it in Latin, it probably means something. Let's look. Cuneiform. I think it means primitive because cuneiform is a type of writing. Let's see here. Okay, denoting or relating to a wedge-shaped characteristic in ancient writing system of Mesopotamia. Okay, wedges. Makes sense. They're wedged together. Okay, accept that. All right. On the top of the ankle bone, right here, or I guess the foot bones, there is one called the talus. The way I remember this is that if you look at the picture of a foot from the side, there's kind of like a bone up on the very, very top. It's the talus. I always think it was like if we're building a palace, you might put it on the top of a hill. So the talus is like the palace of the foot bone. Now, the next one is called the cuboid. We've had a cuboid bone before, so it's this large bone here, very similar to the hamate in the wrist bone, so cuboid. All of your ankle bones are called tarsals, just like your wrist bones are called carpals. So we have less, like there's 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 ankle bones. All right, next, the midfoot bones are called metatarsals. Just like we have metacarpals, you have metatarsals. 27, the heel bone is called your calcaneus. I remember this by dogs. If you tell a dog to sit or to heel, they might go and sit by your heel. So a canine is a dog. So calcaneus to me sounds like a dog sitting on its butt or its calcaneus. Sure. 28. These are the toe bones closest to the foot. Those are called the proximal phalanx, just like in the hand bones. 29 would be the distal phalanx. And again, these would have a middle phalanx, all of these other toes, but I just didn't put on this test because we needed to keep this to 30 terms. And then finally, toes, just like hands, are called phalanges. Okay, make sure you have a study guide made of all 30 terms with some kind of basic definition, and that's what you'll take a picture of and submit for today's credit. That is all.